afternoon and welcome to CEC Gurukul lecture. In continuation with the series on sociology of religion, in today's lecture we are going to learn on Max Weber's approach to religion. So in the previous lectures we have talked about Durkheim's approach, we've talked about Karl Marx's approach to religion, and today we'll try to understand what Max Weber speaks about religion. So in sociology, when we trying to understand religion, one of the ways to understand religion is basically an approach to understand culture. And why do we say that? Because religion belongs to the realm of culture. Religion is basically about rites, beliefs, the way you practice your everyday life. It tells us how we go about approaching life itself. And in that context, when we bring in these main thinkers in sociology, we see there's a difference in approach. Durkheim was talking about functional approach. So in the lecture on Durkheim on religion, we saw how Durkheim tried to explain religion with reference to the collective consciousness. That is, that when the society was moving from an industrial society to a complex society, we are tending to move away from collectivity to individualism. And that is how he explains from mechanical solidarity to organic solidarity. But then the role of religion does not deny, and it continues to play the role of increasing the consciousness among individuals or the sense of belonging to a group. So he gave us a functional approach. Then in the next lecture on Karl Marx, we talked about how Marx was kind of considering religion as a product of the materialistic relations. And what was the materialistic relation? It was the relation of the means of ownership or the modes of production. So as society evolved, there was a change in the modes of production. There was a change in which people started thinking about ways of looking at life. And in that context, Marx kind of considered religion as being built on the materialistic conditions and argued that for him it was a way to perpetuate inequality. It was a way of maintaining the status quo. So he called it as an opium of the masses, that it gave them a kind of a satisfaction to accept their lower position or to accept their poor economic conditions, and therefore it was kind of an extension of the unequal working relations or the inequality in the society. So in sociology, when we kind of refer to the basic text, Marx is referred as a conflict theorist, where he's trying to look into the conflict between those who own the means of production and those who do not, or in other words, between the capitalist and the non-capitalist. Then we look into Max Weber, which is the third main approach to understand religion, and Weber gives us the Verstehen approach. Verstehen is interpretative sociology. The meaning of the action changes, and we need to understand the meaning in order to understand the institution. And here he would kind of go against Marx and say that it is not kind of economy that gives rise to religion, but it is rather the other way around. It is religion which is kind of giving way to an economic form or economic relation. And in his research, he tries to explain the emergence of a kind of an economic behavior, that is capitalism, and specifically the reason that it emerged in the West, he's trying to find such a relation. Why is it that most of the people with high economic income are from certain community, are from certain parts of the world? And he arrived at an understanding that it is those people who are Protestant are the ones who kind of are able to build on the capitalist and are able to become capitalist. So therefore the understanding of Weber is that it is religion which is giving way to one form of economy. So this is the contrast between Marx. Marx is saying that it is economy at the base, and it will decide what form of ideas and belief people will practice, or rather for Karl Marx, the economy is the base and culture is a superstructure. Weber kind of converts it around, reverses it around and says it is the culture which will determine the economy. So therefore, his understanding of Weber, when we read Weber, is also within the later kind of an understanding of modernity, rationality, and he was looking into the modern society which had certain ways of action which he would call rational legal action, and that is that in this form of society or modern society, every action had a rational explanation. There had to be a kind of legitimate reason why a particular action was done, and in that context he looks into capitalism or capitalist action as a rational legal action, and he explains it with the help of Protestant ethic. So the title of his work, which is kind of explains the concept of religion to us, is The Protestant Ethic and the Emergence of Capitalism. So he is also, when we and this kind of falls into the larger debate, that when we talk about religion, we are not only talking about, say, individual belief or certain community belief, we are also talking about large scale transformations which was taking place, specifically when these theories were being conceptualized, and that is that this is the process of secularization. The secularization in the sense that move a whole idea of religion being relegated to the private sphere, which is the Reformation and Renaissance, which led to the separation of the church and the state, and therefore secularization would imply that there is a diminishing importance of religion in determining political activity. So in a way it was kind of considered as a breakdown from the traditional method where religion and politics was enmeshed, or it was the church which decided the political event. So he is also looking into how society is moving towards secularization, which is again another form in which rationality can be understood. So his larger argument within which we can be able to make sense of his understanding of religion is the understanding of modernity and rationality. So he was trying to understand the nature of modern society, and he was trying to under the notion that in the Western country there was the practice of economic rationalism. Economic rationalism is that every action that was being done in order, say, for profit or for saving had to have a rational legal explanation of why that action was being done. There was nothing to be assumed. There was nothing which was to be assigned to supernatural causes. Everything was to be kind of recorded, everything was written, and everything was legal. So he tends to consider the modernity as giving way to a different form of capitalism, which he will differentiate from the traditional capitalism. And he is not only concerned in terms of technical development. Yes, modernity brought with it a lot of technological and scientific development, but here he is talking about morality. He is talking about the way in which people were rationalizing their action, and he argues that capitalism had arisen not because of technology but because of religion. So when he says about because of religion, religion was also in terms of how it enabled people to think in a certain way, bring about change in their lifestyle, and therefore give more significance to the idea of wealth accumulation, to the idea of how wealth should not be wasted, how people should not live leisure life, which is kind of too much of wastage. One should not engage in conspicuous consumption. So these are the way in which he is talking about the moral action which the individuals are practicing, which gives rise to a form of economic activity. There is no single cause, and it is therefore certain that Weber did not ascribe the rise of capitalism to Protestantism alone. So we need to keep in a larger picture of the society which is kind of taking place. So it's not only that because people were Protestant, capitalism was emerging. The reason why we can say this is because it was emerging in other parts of the world also where Protestantism was not being practiced. So there are a number of factors that went together to lead to the growth of capitalism. So what Weber wants to argue in his work is that Protestant ethic has an elective affinity with capitalism. What does it mean? It kind of ensures, Weber meant by this that there is something which is very common between the two, and we will see in the course of the lecture what is so similar, what is the common factor between Protestant ethic and capitalism. But before we do that, we have to understand what he meant by Protestant ethic, what he meant by modern capitalism, what Weber meant by talking about spirit of capitalism. So when we look into this entire understanding of religion, because the entire lecture is to have an understanding of the way in which social scientists conceptualize religion, we see that the whole argument or the theories of religion was structured around the idea of understanding social change. And this will take us back to the discourse or discipline of sociology, which is kind of located at a time when there was large scale changes. So we know that it was the Reformation, the Industrial Revolution, which led to the emergence of the discipline of sociology. So these thinkers or social scientists were basically making attempt to understand the change that was taking place, and in order to kind of bring about certain kind of stability, or there was one group of thinkers who wanted to maintain status quo. Such a large scale of change was kind of causing a lot of disharmony, lot of conflict, and therefore they wanted to bring back some amount of stability. And in that context, Durkheim kind of gives reference that if we give more emphasis to the collective, to the community, and less significance to our individual desires and our individuals' wishes, then there will be a kind of stability in society. Similarly, Max Weber believed that it was religion which was kind of leading to about social change. He believed that religion can bring about social change, and which we have already kind of discussed, that because you had this idea of the emergence of Protestant, which will come out during the process of Reformation, and because of this, because of the belief of certain people that kind of emphasized on one way of life compared to the other, which then kind of was conducive for the emergence of capitalism. He is kind of making a very specific example of Calvinism, which is kind of the ideas or the thinking of John Calvin, and it is a branch of Protestantism. So he's specifically looking at Calvinism to show how religion can lead to social change, or how it is the belief practices, the way we think about society, that led to the more significance of economic activity. So it is not kind of denying that religion has become insignificant or religion is kind of no longer value of relevance, unlike the discourses on secularism, which says that secularism means there is no space for religion. Contrary to that, Weber is saying that religion is very much a part of a modern economy, and it is rather responsible for the emergence of the modern form of economy, which is capitalism. So his basic question that he begins with is why capitalism was created in the Western Europe rather than somewhere else. So he was kind of did a lot of statistics and data collection and tried to find out that why it is only in the certain part of the geography that more and more of capitalists are found compared to the other parts. And his answer was that it is the historical conditions which led to the cause of religious values. And these religious values played a very significant role in creating a spirit of capitalism. And we will see what is the spirit of capitalism, which would kind of give more emphasis on saving and investment, and therefore going on building your capital. Weber therefore termed his work as a factual refutation of the materialistic conception of history. So in lecture on Karl Marx, we had understood that for Marx, religion was a materialistic understanding. Why did he say that? He said because religion was a product of the material change in the modes of production. Weber is negating this, and Weber is saying just the other way around, and it's saying it is the change in the belief system, change in the religious practices that leads to change in the economy. So Weber was basically kind of critiquing Marx, and he was dismissing the idea that such idea originate as a reflection of superstructure of economic situation. So this is an explicit argument versus Marxism. Weber uses an example from the United States to critique Marx, and he says that highly developed spirit of capitalism were in the southern states founded by large capitalists for exploitation. So rather in here we will say that there is no amount of kind of exploitation, though they are capitalist, but each of them would be then be engaged in building on their capital, and when they would be investing and kind of increasing the business, then it would actually give employment to others. And if everybody kind of takes on the ethic of saving and going on investing, then they will be able to become a capitalist themselves. So that is what Weber was arguing in his work. So in the northern state, founded by preachers, small merchants and craftsmen, there was an undeveloped spirit of capitalism. And exploitation is in both places, but yet in one there is a more amount of capitalist growth. That is, there is a possibility that those who are on the other side can kind of imbibe in them the ethic and become a capitalist. So his work is basically trying to understand religious affiliation and social stratification. So this is the first section of his book on the Protestant ethic and spirit of capitalism, where he is talking about the stratification, how if we look into the world, it could be stratified according to the belief system, or there are certain parts in which there is dominance of Protestant and there are certain parts where this is opposed to Catholic. So now this reference is only to the Western countries. And he's saying that the Protestants more than the Catholics have have more kind of a business. They are more into business, they are more into going into trading and building more and more capital. He observed that most people in the highly skilled and trade professionals were Protestant. Protestants have shown a special tendency to develop economic rationalism. So when we look into the stratification or the strata, he is trying to argue that Protestant would be more on the topper margin in terms of better economic assets, better business, more into technical and professional work compared to the Catholic. And then kind of he says that how do we understand capitalism? So basically, to understand Weber's approach to religion, we need to understand two important things. One is what he means by Protestant ethic, and the second is what he means by modern capitalism. So here we need to keep in mind that he is differentiating it from the traditional capitalism. It is only modern capitalism which is kind of has a more affinity to Protestant ethic. So Weber comprehended capitalism as a civilization of modern man. So he is not critical of capitalism. If we see that Karl Marx was critical of capitalism in the sense it was leading to exploitation and it was leading to alienation, Weber is saying that it is kind of a indication that there is progress, that man has civilized. And what motivated him is the primary orientation to the attainment of profit in nominally peaceful system. So you have a system of exchange. Now if there is a kind of a peaceful system which is rationally, legally justified, then there will be some kind of exchange. Obviously it is never a zero sum game. One has to gain, other has to lose. So who will lose will depend on what kind of ethical practice you have. And in that sense, he defined capitalism as the pursuit of forever renewed profit by means of rational capitalist enterprises. So this is very important. We need to keep in mind that Weber was saying that it is a kind of accumulation of wealth. But this accumulation of wealth is kind of very calculated. We're going to follow a rational system. Plus, there is no kind of bargaining, there is no kind of, stealing and kind of taking it by illegal means. So, whatever wealth is accumulated or whatever capital is being accumulated is through ethical means. So, he is not concerned about capitalism is a kind of phenomena which was part of almost every part of the world. But Weber's concern was basically with the capitalism of Europe and America. He was not concerned about the nature of capitalism in China, India or Babylon. He was only looking into the Western countries. And here he was kind of saying in that in the Western context, capitalism was or capitalism meant the pursuit of profit and renewed profit. So it's not just profit at one point, you go on renewing your profit by means of rational activities. So it existed in a kind of free labor, routinized, calculated administration. So you had all the features of the rational legal action to be found in capitalism. It's not a desire by kind of stealing someone or kind of appropriating someone's wealth, but it was accumulating by investing, and it was a moral action. You, whatever you earn, you invest, and you go on investing without wasting it on any kind of luxurious item. You lead an ascetic life. So you acquire wealth. And why do you acquire wealth? Because the Protestant ethic believes that the wealth is, the more wealthy you are, is an indication of God's glory on earth. So every individual is born to glorify God's glory on, and therefore the more wealth you build, you more glorified you are. So God, either you are chosen or you are damned. So if you are chosen, you are wealthy, and you will go on doing your task, and in that sense you will go on acquiring wealth. So Franklin, the time is money. Wealth is very significant in understanding Weber's concept of, so it's not begging, it's not pirating, it's not stealing. It is accumulation of wealth through rational, legal, calculated modes, and whatever wealth is acquired, you go on accumulating it, and that would lead to the formation of the spirit of capitalism. So we will talk about more in terms of understanding Weber's approach to religion by looking into some of the more important concepts like predestination, calling, and other in order to complete our understanding on Weber's approach to religion. With this, I come to an end of today's lecture. Thank you.